And once it does, they actually have a very high survivability. In fact, some snapping turtles have been found to live upwards of 100 years old. So if you're seeing one about this size, you know it's at least about 20 years old, but it could also be 100 years old. I also like to talk about reproductive rate. And so what this graph is showing is the reproductive potential of different game species in Ontario. So we have snapping turtles over here, black bear, moose, and white-tailed deer. And the reason why snapping turtles are compared to these animals is that the snapping turtle actually used to be on the Fish and Game list. So it was legal to hunt snapping turtles at one point. It wasn't up, it was just up until a couple years ago that they took it off of that list because snapping turtles are also listed as a species of special concern. So it didn't make sense to have a species on that list and also allow people to hunt. So what this figure is showing is basically after 17 years, so we have the year down the side here, after 17 years, that one white-tailed deer and its offspring have produced 912 individuals. That one moose has produced 681 individuals. And that one black bear, 25 individuals. The snapping turtle is only just reaching sexual maturity, okay? And it's only just laying its first clutch of eggs. So compared to those other species, it takes a long time for it to mature, and that's only one clutch of eggs, and less than 1% of those eggs are gonna survive. So what does this all mean? Well, in order for one female snapping turtle to replace herself, she has to lay about 1,400 eggs. So that's a lot of eggs. If she's laying on average around 35 eggs, that might not happen until she's about 50 or 60 years old. So why do I want to talk about this? Well, it just highlights the importance of the adults in turtle populations. Okay, they're extremely important. These reproductive adults are just extremely important for those populations. If we see the death of an adult turtle, that death has a greater negative impact on the population than a juvenile would or a hatchling would. So yes, it's always distressing to see the death of these baby turtles, but it's really these reproducing adults that we need to take care to protect. So turtles have been going about these things for 200 million years, and they've been working out just fine for them. It's only been since we started to change the landscape that we see turtles starting to have these problems. Turtles are actually one of the most endangered species across the globe. And in Ontario, I mentioned we have 8 native species. Well, all 8 are considered species at risk. So this includes the common snapping turtle, which you see on the left, and then the painted turtle, which is on the right. These are 2 of the most common turtles that you can see. And it was just last year that the painted turtle was added to the species at risk list. So why are these turtles at risk? I'm going to just touch on a couple of the biggest threats. The number 1 threat is habitat loss. So in southern Ontario, we have lost 75% of our wetland habitat. Turtles like wetlands, so if there's no place for them to live, we're going to see a decline in those turtles. Another big factor is road mortality. So the figure on the left shows the density of roads in southern Ontario. I think it's like you can't go more than 1 to 2 kilometers in Ontario without bumping into a road. So when you have this density of roads and you have turtles moving across roads to feed or to breed or to use other type of habitat, you're going to have conflict between turtles and the cars. Poaching is also another factor as to why some turtle species are at risk. Turtles can be sold as pets, they can be sold as food, or for medicinal purposes. Some species, this is a factor for them more so than other species, but it definitely causes problems and has caused the decline of some of our most endangered species. And the last one I'm touching on is predation. Raccoons, foxes, skunks, birds all find the turtle nests and can dig them up and eat those eggs. And although this is a natural occurrence to some extent, if we, the more we attract these type of animals to our areas where there's turtles, the more negative impact they're gonna have on those populations. Any questions about any of that before I move on at all? Okay, the next section I'm gonna just give you an introduction to each of our 8 turtle species, and I'll just give you a couple features that'll help you identify those turtles. The first one is the Midland painted turtle. This is probably one of the more common ones that you're gonna see, especially on those nice sunny days because they like to bask. You'll notice that they have this kind of olive green to brown carapace, and that's the top part of the shell. And they have these red blotches on the sides of their shell. They also have some striping on their neck and head as well as their limbs, so that's red and yellow striping. And this is just a photo of what you might see if it's on a nice sunny day and you've found a nice turtle spot. They'll be lined up on that log, and sometimes they even climb up on each other to get the best spot. The next one is the snapping turtle, another common species that we have. Its carapace is brown to black, and even on this one you can maybe see some green algae, and that will grow on their shell because they spend so much time in the water. Their skin is often brown, as well as their tail. You can see that down here, which is super cool. It's very long, and it's got these spikes on them, so it actually looks like a dinosaur tail. Right here, you'll also see it's got a serrated back edge of its shell. And then, if you ever happen to see a snapping turtle upside down, you'll notice that it's got a very small plastron, so that's the underneath of its shell. And so when it's on land and it feels threatened, unlike the other turtles that can pull in their arms and pull in their head, snapping turtles can't do this, so the shell doesn't actually provide them with a lot of protection. So on land, when they snap, it's not because they're aggressive turtles, it's just that's their only means of protection. If you encounter one of the other turtles on land, they probably just pull in all their legs and their head and wait there for you to go away. Next up is the musk turtle, or the stinkpot turtle. And just like its name suggests, when this turtle is threatened, it releases a sort of musky odor. You'll notice it's got these 2 light stripes on either side of its head. It also has these little fleshy projections on its chin called barbels. And it's got kind of a browny olive carapace, and it's highly domed. Now these guys are quite small. As adults, they probably get to that big. And sometimes people confuse these with a young snapping turtle. But if you remember from what I just showed you of the snapping turtle, the rear edge of its margin is not serrated like the snapping turtle is. It also doesn't have that long tail like the snapping turtle does. And I put this picture in. This is a hatchling musk turtle. You can see it's very, very tiny. This is was just hatched. It does have those that striping on the side of its head. And it does have some blotches here on the margin of its shell, which will eventually disappear.
So the shell will grow as the turtle grows?
Yeah. Next up is the spotted turtle. This is one of our most endangered turtle species here in Ontario, and that's because it is one of the turtles sought after for the pet trade. This is also a small turtle, kind of growing to about that size. You'll notice it's got some yellow and orange spots on its head, its neck, and its leg. And then it has a black shell with these yellow or orange spots on its back. And spotted turtles are sexually dimorphic, which means that we can tell the males and the females apart from different features that they have. And so spotted turtles that are female have orange eyes and a yellow chin, like the one on the top in the picture over on the left, whereas the males have a brown chin or brown eyes and a tan chin. Next up is the Spiny softshell turtle. And if you remember back to my first slide, I said that turtles have a hard shell. Well, that wasn't completely true because this guy actually has a soft shell. So instead of being hard like the other turtles, it's kind of leathery. It also has this really cool nose. It's very long and tubular. These turtles are very shy, and so sometimes they'll just hang out in the water and you'll see their nose stick up like that so they can take a breath. They also have a very flat carapace, and they're sometimes referred to as a pancake turtle. They camouflage really well there. They like to bask on the sides of riverbanks like that. And these turtles, you can also tell the males and the females from each other. This one here is either a male or a juvenile, and you can tell because they have these really defined spots on their carapace, whereas the female is the top left there, and she has more of a camouflage type coloring. The females also get a lot bigger than the males do for this species. This one's the Blandings turtle, and this is my favorite turtle. It has a black to grayish brown carapace, and it's got these spots or flecks on it that are a yellowy color. And unlike the spotted turtle, there's a lot more spots and flecks on this one. But the big feature that you'll notice is it's got this bright yellow chin and throat. So if you happen to see one of these basking and it's got its neck out, they have really long necks. If you see that chin, then you know it's a Blandings turtle. Probably though, you'll encounter it like this on the road. It's got its neck pulled in. You can kind of see it there. But they have a really highly domed shell. I've heard it described as like an army helmet, so you might see it from afar on the road. These guys can travel really far, in fact, for nesting sites. I think it's up to 10 kilometers that they can travel to find these suitable nesting habitat. This one's the northern map turtle, and what you'll notice here is it's got a slightly raised keel, and this goes right down the middle of its shell. It's also got these yellow stripes on the head and the limbs, so that's kind of similar to the painted turtle that I showed you earlier, except this one just has yellow, whereas the painted turtle had more reddy coloration to it. It also has numerous fine lines on its shell, so if you get close to one of them, you can see these lines, and it actually looks like the contour lines on a map, which is how it got its name. And the last thing to notice is that it's got this serrated margin, and this is like the snapping turtle. It had that serrated margin as well.
Is that for defense, or is there?
Sorry?
Is that for defense? Like if someone tries to?
I've never heard about that, but I'm not sure why some have that and some don't actually. And then the last one is the wood turtle. So this is another one of our highly endangered species. It has a brown shell, and it actually, as it gets older, kind of looks like the ringed wood texture of a tree. So that's how the wood turtle got its name. You'll notice it has some orange coloration on its neck and its limbs. And this one is the most terrestrial of all the turtles that we have in Ontario. So it does still like to be near rivers, but it will spend more time on land. And what these turtles do is that they'll walk on land and they stomp their legs, and this can simulate rain falling on the ground, and so it causes worms to come up to the surface, and then the turtle has a nice meal right there. So those are the 8 native turtle species that we have in Ontario. I'm showing this one. This is a non-native species. It's called the red-eared slider, and it is a turtle that we see in Ontario. This is a common pet turtle that people would get. And what happens is people will get a pet turtle, they don't realize how long-lived these turtles are, or how big of a tank they need, or all the water changes that you have to do, and maybe they don't want the turtle anymore. And so what they think is the best thing to do is release it into the wild. Well, this is not actually a great idea, because not only can they compete with our native species for resources, but they also can introduce disease as well. So with these guys, you'll notice they have this red blotch behind their eye. And they also have more of a greeny yellow shell. But it's really that red blotch that you'll notice. So like I said, non-native, it's not one that you want to see in the wild, but we are encountering it more often. So the next few slides are just some photos of our native species in their natural habitats. And I just put these up here because I wanted you to see what you might actually see if you're out looking for turtles on a nice sunny day. So does anyone want to take a stab at IDing any of these ones?
The one at the back is the one with the snout, and I think it's down south on Lake Huron and Rondo or Long Point or something like that.
Yep, yeah, you're right.
What's the name of it? No.
So you know what's a good giveaway here, and I didn't mention these in the other pictures, but you see these spines behind its neck? That's the spiny softshell. So they get really big, they have that leathery shell, that tubular nose. So that's the spiny softshell.
So there's none of those in the pine room? Spiny softshell?
Not, they're more of a river species, so we see them more like in the river around Port Franks.
So would we see all these species locally, or would we have to drive to different places in Ontario to?
In the Port Franks Grand Bend area, you have, the only one you don't have is the wood turtle.
Where would they be?
They're in different parts of the province. I don't usually say where they are just because they're a highly endangered species. So just they're not in this area essentially. They are in other parts of our watershed, but just not in this area that we know of. We don't have records of them.
The one in the front left looks like it could be the Mattre turtle because it has all those lines under its neck, but it might not be.
Yeah, no, you're right. This one is the Mattre turtle, and you can kind of see that raised keel there.
And the other one, I'm not sure, it could be painted because it has yellow and red on it. Could be the painted.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah,
Oh,
you're right.
I got them all.
You got them all.
So do they all mix and match, or do they fight?
Some can be territorial, like I have seen snapping turtles kind of wrestling with each other. But I have also seen different species basking together. Like sometimes you see painted turtles on top of snapping turtles. So I think it depends how they're feeling. If that's a good basking spot, maybe they don't care. Everyone can be there.
So how strong is the snapping turtles around here? Is their
Bite?
Their bite, like will it take your finger off? Will it hurt your finger?
I'd say it would hurt your finger for sure. I was just telling some of the people here that I was watching a video. Someone tried to put their hand and they did it, and it clamped on, and for sure it hurt. It didn't take it off, but I don't think it's something that you want to just do like that. Does anyone have any ideas about these turtles?
That's the one with the shell that you said had red around the edges. Can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, that's the painted. Painted.
And that other one has red.
Yeah, do you remember this?
Is that the invasive one?
Yeah, that's the
This
red.
red slider?
Yeah.
Where are they native to?
It's in the U.S. I'm not sure exactly where, but there
Is
are regions where they're native.
They sell them in pet stores. Our kids had radio sliders when they were little.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
they're
little ones
the
like that.
common pet store turtle. And then this one's really hard, but this is a Mattre turtle here. You can sometimes tell by their mouth. They almost have this really yellowy mouth. Okay, this one's a little bit harder, but this is sometimes what you see, right? Kind of from far away, or maybe you're using binoculars. Any guesses for
Maybe
this?
the one in the middle is the snapping. It's got a really dry looking shell.
Yeah, and it is serrated. You can kind of tell it has those serrations there. One thing you'll note, it's got that keel though. So that's the Mattre turtle. And I said that the Mattre turtles were somewhat similar to painted turtles because they both had those lines. So sometimes you can't really tell what colors are on them, right? But if you see that keel, that's indication that it's a Mattre turtle. So we have a Mattre turtle and then the two painted turtles on there as well. Any questions about our Ontario turtles before I move on to the next section?
Are you the one that did Exeter, the workshop in Exeter in the summertime with the turtles?
The turtle release? Yeah. There's the Huron Stewardship Council, we partner with them as well.
Yeah, up at the, what's it called, the location up there where the offices are, Morrison Dam.
Yes, yeah, have you come to that before? Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through some things that you can do to help turtles. Some of them are fairly simple and then other ones that require a little bit more time and energy. So I talked about predation being one of the threats to turtles. So one of the easiest things we can do is just secure the garbage and don't feed wild animals. If we can do that, then we're not attracting these animals to the area. Another thing to do is dispose of any garbage or fishing gear properly. The last thing you want to do is if you get a turtle hooked on a line is to just cut it and then the turtle has to go off and try to fend for itself with this injury. So also everyone knows that these rings are terrible, so we need to just make sure garbage gets in the proper places.
We cut them, we cut all those little things, striations, so that nothing can get caught.
Yeah. You can also create or maintain turtle habitat. So depending on your property, you may have a pond or something. So if you leave logs within the pond, then that creates basking habitat for the turtles. This picture over here shows natural shoreline. So if you have some shoreline, if you can keep it as natural as possible, this is better for the turtles because they can actually climb up onto the shoreline and come and nest or move to different habitats versus if that was a hardened shoreline. And then anytime you can use fewer chemicals on your property, that's better for not just turtles, but for all of the wildlife. I mentioned poaching was a threat to turtles, so anytime you are around an area and you know there's turtles there and you think that something's going on and it's just not right, you can also call the 1-800 number there. That's for the Ministry of Natural Resources. There are conservation officers who will get that message and they will go investigate your concern. There have been poachers that have been caught and have been fined and I think even experienced some jail time. So this is a serious concern and anyone who is working with turtles needs to have the appropriate permits. So if we're in the Port Franks Grand Bend area doing some research, we have to have those permits with us at all times. This is also a really easy thing to do. I mentioned that turtle nesting season is just about to start, goes all the way through June and into early July. So if you're driving around, especially if you know there's an area where turtles frequently cross the road, and sometimes you'll see that with these crossing area signs, just slow down and make sure you're scanning the road as you're driving. It's also important to do this in the water as well. If you're a boater, keep an eye out for turtles because they can be injured by propellers as well. If you happen to see a turtle on the road, you can also assist the turtle to cross the road. The most important thing in doing this is to make sure that it's safe for you. So make sure you can pull off safely and just keep an eye on the traffic before you go out onto the road. What you want to do is approach the turtle from behind. And for the smaller turtles, you can just pick it up on the sides, just like this, okay? And then you just move it across the road in the direction that it's heading. You never want to move a turtle to a new area. So sometimes you see a turtle on the road and you're like, I don't know where this turtle is going, like there doesn't seem to be any water nearby, and you know of a pond just down the road. You don't want to take it there because that turtle maybe just came from there and spent all day trying to get to its nesting habitat. The turtle knows what it wants to do, so if you can just get it off the road, that's what you want to do. Now for snapping turtles, it's a little bit different. You always want to grab the back of the shell. So I'll just sort of show you here. You never want to be like this. It always has to be back here. I'm going to show you a little video that demonstrates how to do it. But you either want to pick them up at the back of the shell like this and move them across the road. You can also use a shovel or a car mat or a blanket, which you'll see in the video. But this is what you definitely don't want to do. If you pick it up by the tail like that, you can damage its vertebrae. You can also pick it up kind of by the base of the tail, so you're not picking it up, you're holding it by the base of the tail, and then you slide your other hand under there. That's called the tray method, and that supports the weight that way. So there's lots of different ways to get this done. It's not always pretty, but it doesn't need to be pretty. You just need to move that turtle off the road. So I'll just start this video.
Hi, we all know what a big impact roads have on wildlife, and turtles in particular. And we all want to. Hi, we all know what a big impact roads have on wildlife, and turtles in particular. And we all want to help turtles cross the road so that they don't get hurt. But one of the biggest questions that we get at Adopt a Pond is how do you help a turtle across the road? The first thing that you want to keep in mind is that you always help a turtle across the road in the direction that it's headed. Now the next big question is how do you help a large snapping turtle like this one across the road when they can be very insecure on land, very defensive, and not know that you're trying to help them out and potentially try to bite you. First thing you want to do is make sure that you never ever grab a turtle by the tail and pick it up this way. The turtle's vertebrae, or its spine, which is fused to the underside of its shell, runs through its tail. If you were to pick a turtle up by its tail, you could literally dislocate its spine and hurt it quite badly. Also, you never want to try and pick a large snapping turtle up like this by the sides of its shell. They have deceptively long necks, and if you had a really feisty turtle, it could reach around and try to bite your hands. The best place to grab it is always right at the very back of the turtle. At the back of his shell, they have almost perfect little handles here where you can pick up the turtle and move it across the road. Or you can grab the turtle by the rear of the shell, spin him around, and gently slide him across the pavement. And when you get to the other side, turn him back in the direction that he was facing. Now, if the turtle's small enough and you're comfortable with lifting it, you can lift it right up, walk it across the road, and set it down on the other side. If you have a very large turtle that you can't lift, the best thing is to do is just grab the back of its shell and literally slide it across the pavement. This could scratch the turtle a little bit, but they are reptiles, they have tough scaly skin, and they can handle it if it means it's going to save its life from being hit by cars. Now, if you're not comfortable with handling a turtle at all, there are a few other methods that you could use to help a snapping turtle across the road. One thing is a car mat. This is something that everyone should have in their car and can be quite practical for helping a turtle cross the road. So you place the turtle on the car mat. Again, just like the sliding technique, you can use the mat to slide the turtle across the roadway and then turn them around in the direction he was facing. The next one you can use is perhaps you have an old bed sheet in your trunk. Same as the mat, you can get the turtle onto the sheet and use the sheet to slide the turtle across the roadway. Remember, when you get to the other side, turn around and face him in the direction he was in. Or sometimes you might find it easier just to turn around and find something in the bush nearby, like this piece of wood. Drop it underneath the turtle and use it to help you slide the turtle across the road to the other side.
So I've seen turtles that have broken shells.
Yes.
How does that happen? Car runs
Usually
over.
by being hit by a car. sometimes it's intentional, especially with snappers. People don't tend to like snappers all the time, and so that has happened, but sometimes you don't see them in time. But yeah, most injuries on the road are from cars. Has anyone actually moved a turtle across the road? So with snapping turtles, they showed you a variety of different methods. And the important thing is just to keep yourself behind the snapper like that, and use whatever method you're comfortable with. It will do that snapping sometimes. Sometimes you get ones that are quite feisty. So that might catch you off guard, but it feels threatened. It doesn't know that you're trying to help it. So don't let that discourage you. Just continue to move it across the road and point it in the direction that it was going.
Will your initiatives be compromised by the government cutbacks in watershed conservation initiatives?
What we tend to do in the Port Franks Grand Bend area is not funded through the provincial government. So likely not in this area, and a lot of what we do is with volunteers. So they're either volunteering their information to us or they're doing things like this. So that's good. The more we can educate people about moving turtles across the road, the better. So was there any questions about that, about the techniques that you saw or anything? If you do come across a turtle that's injured, it's important to try to get it help. So if you have a box or something in your car, you can put it in there. The important thing is that it needs to have holes in it, needs to be able to breathe, and no food or water. You want to note where you are, because if that turtle is then rehabilitated, it has to be released back to where it comes from. And then you want to call a wildlife center, and I'm going to give you that information on the next slide. I do want to mention that even if you find a turtle that's deceased, if it's a female, you can still sometimes harvest the eggs from that turtle. So I don't mean you don't need to harvest the eggs, but if you call a wildlife center and say, I have a dead turtle, maybe it has eggs, they will still take it, because those eggs can then be removed and then incubated. So in this area, if you find an injured turtle, you can call a couple places. One of them is called Heaven's Wildlife Rescue, and this is in Oil Springs. The second one is called the Ontario Turtle Conservation Centre, and this is the main turtle hospital in Ontario, and it is in Peterborough. So don't be discouraged about it being in Peterborough. If you call this center and say, I have an injured turtle, they have a network of drivers that they work with. So what they'll do is they'll put a call out to their drivers and say, can anyone get this turtle from Grand Bend up to Peterborough? Or maybe they just do a leg of that journey. So don't worry about that. You can put a call into either of these centers, and even Heaven's Wildlife, they don't do surgeries, but they are able to provide turtles with some pain medication and to keep it comfortable. So it's still a good option. And then what they would likely do is contact the Turtle Conservation Centre to get the ball rolling with a taxi service if it needs to get up to Peterborough. So another way to help turtles is actually to volunteer for this turtle taxi service. So what you would do is just contact that organization, and when they get a call for a turtle needing a ride, this email goes out to everyone. If you are able to do any part of that journey up to Peterborough, then you just say, yes, I can do this. All you need is a vehicle, and you don't need to handle the animals. So you just need to have some time and a vehicle to do this. This is another really simple way to help turtles, and that's to simply report your sightings. And there's a couple ways you can do this. One of the good organizations to report to is called the Ontario Reptile and Amphibian Atlas. And this is run by Ontario Nature. And there are several ways you can actually report your sightings. You can get an app on your phone, so if you're out and about and you have your phone, you just open this app, you can take a picture of the turtle, you fill in a few details with some drop-down menus, and then off it goes, they get that record. If you would rather do it online, you could do it that way, or you can email them, or you can even mail in a submission as well. So it's really important to submit these sightings because the more data we have, the more understanding we have of turtles and the habitats that they use. So the atlas, when they get all this information, they compile it into these distribution maps. And I don't know, is there any way to kind of slide it over the projector maybe so we can see? So what this map is showing, there's all these different squares, and they're 10 by 10 kilometer squares. The green ones are, they've had sightings both before and after 1996. The yellow ones I think are just after 1996, and then the red ones are just prior to 1996. So those would be historical sightings, the red ones. So as you can see, this map, there's a lot of sightings. This is for painted turtles. Okay, so this is what we know about distribution of painted turtles in Ontario. The blank spaces are there aren't any turtles there, or someone just hasn't reported a turtle there. This is the map for musk turtles, so you can see a lot less common, or maybe people just aren't reporting their sightings yet. So the more that we can report, the more we know, and the better we can make decisions about protecting turtles. If you're in the Port Franks Grand Bend area, we encourage you to report your sightings to us. So every year we send out a flyer like this to people in the Port Franks area, and we just request the sightings from them. You can email us. Sometimes people will attach their photos as well. You can phone us. It's just important to send your the turtle a photo if you can, and any sort of details that you have with that sighting. If you're not able to identify it, it's not a big problem. Sometimes if you can just describe the turtle, that can help. And then we need a description of the location of that turtle as well.
Last year, I just got that brochure in the mail, and I walked outside my step, and there was a little turtle shell that was empty, upside down.
Oh, yes.
So I took a picture and sent it to you, and then I figured that a bird must have dropped it, and it was like a baby snapping turtle, because it still has a tail attached to the shell, and part of its 2 legs, but the rest of it was all gone, it was empty.
Yes.
And it wasn't there a minute ago, and all of it, so my
That's right.
husband and I kind of went like, how did that get there? Because so it must have been a bird.
Yes.
Would a bird have eaten it?
Yep, a bird could do that.
It
for
was like
sure.
in the middle of the day, and
Yeah.
we've been outside several
It
times.
could have happened, like it could have been moving somewhere and a bird saw it, came, scooped it up, and then was eating it, and then took off with it, and then dropped it.
That's
So,
what we figured must have happened.
yeah. So yes, if you're in the Port Franks Grand Bend area, please send us your sightings, and then we, at the end of the year, always compile the sightings from the community and send them to the atlas so that they have them from this area as well. So I'll just talk a little bit about what has been done in the Port Franks area. And one of the things that the community did there was request these turtle crossing signs. So it was really because of them reporting their turtle signs that we were able to get this. Because we started this program in 2010, and after a couple years we were really seeing that there was this one area where turtles were always getting hit on the road. So what we did is we took those sightings and we wrote a letter to the municipality and we said, listen, we know turtles are getting killed here. Would you consider placing signs there? And we actually got these signs from the Toronto Zoo. and we got them, and the municipality installed them in the area. So those are up. There's a couple in Port Franks, a couple areas, and then there's also a couple signs up in the Grand Bend area as well. So a few years later, we were noticing that although we had these signs up, we still were seeing some turtles being hit on the road, and so we really thought, what else could we do in this area? And so one of the things that we did was we installed some turtle exclusion fencing. And so that's this black fencing right here. And what we did was we attached it to the guide rail, which was existing at this location, and then the bottom part is buried under the substrate here. So if a turtle was to come out of the wetland and want to cross the road, it wouldn't be able to do so, and it would have to go either way or back into the wetland. And one of the ends of the fence leads to a culvert that goes under the road. So if a turtle starts walking along there, it will be guided down and under that culvert and hopefully crosses that way instead of over top of the road. So we did that in 2016, and in 2017 and in 2018, it was monitored by a really dedicated group of volunteers, and we noticed that this really helped in reducing the mortality on this road. Another thing that we do in the Port Franks Grand Bend area is we provide these nest protection cages. So if somebody sees a turtle nesting on their property, we can provide these nest cages, and there's two different types. This one is kind of a cylinder, and we dig it down into the ground around the nest. And then this one has a bunch of snapping turtle hatchlings on it, but it's kind of a wood frame with the wire mesh on top, and it was placed over the nest and then secured. So after we place these, we work with the landowner so that they kind of know when to remove that cage. Some of them just leave it on for the first couple days, because what happens after a turtle nests is the scent is there of the mother, and so it's really easy for predators to find that nest in that initial period. So sometimes the homeowner will take the cage off after that. Some homeowners prefer to leave it on for a little bit longer and then take it off right before they think that the hatchlings will emerge. And then some homeowners even like to wait and then do daily checks until they see those hatchlings emerge and then take it off. So we work with the homeowners on a variety of different ways to install and keep these nest cages on. So that about wraps up my presentation today. I do encourage you to continue to learn more about turtles. You should definitely try and visit ontarionature.org. That's that website that has those interactive maps. There's lots and lots of information on turtles there, as well as other reptiles. OntarioTurtle.ca is the website for that turtle hospital in Peterborough, so lots of good information there. And if you want to watch something, there's a short documentary, I think it's about 15 minutes, and it's on the Ontario Turtle Conservation Centre, and it's called Fix and Release, and they show what they do in basically rehabilitating these turtles and then releasing them back into the wild. So I just want to thank you all for listening today. I hope you found it informative, and I'm happy to take questions, and I'll just leave you with that advice from a turtle.
Did anyone have any questions for Hope? Yeah, that was certainly very informative.
I did bring some materials here if people are interested in taking them.